The story begins inside a royal chamber, where 16-year-old Prince Wine Salema Arbalest of the Kingdom of Natra was meeting with Ninim Raleigh, the brilliant girl who served as both his chief advisor and personal bodyguard. Standing before them were 4 of the kingdom's highest-ranking officials. The men had gathered for an official council meeting, and they informed Prince Wine of urgent news delivered by an imperial ambassador. The emperor of the empire had died. The officials explained that this event could ignite conflicts across the continent, as numerous kingdoms would likely compete for the now vacant imperial throne. However, Vine showed little interest in struggles beyond his own borders. Confidently, he instructed the officials to focus their attention on the Kingdom of Natra's internal affairs instead. The officials were astonished by his wisdom. Hearing his words, they became convinced that Prince Wine would one day bring great glory to the kingdom. But the moment the royal officials left the room, Wine's true personality emerged. He immediately cried out in frustration, declaring that he wished he could simply sell the entire kingdom because, in his eyes, it was hopeless. The scene then shifts to the Kingdom of Natra. Located at the far edge of the continent, the kingdom endured an extremely short spring and a brutally long winter. Its lands consisted mainly of barren plains and rocky mountains that were nearly impossible to cultivate. To make matters worse, the population numbered fewer than 500,000 people. Because of these limitations, Wine struggled to advance the kingdom. Resources were scarce, opportunities were limited, and every decision required careful consideration. At that moment, Ninyam reminded him not to behave so childishly. It became clear that Wine loved complaining about the burden of ruling the kingdom. His true goal was surprisingly simple: strengthen Natra enough to increase its value, sell it for a fortune someday, and then retire peacefully. Suddenly, Falanya Elk Arbalest, Wine's younger sister, entered the room. She informed him that their father's condition had improved and said she wanted to take him on a trip outside the kingdom. However, Wine immediately rejected the idea for security reasons. The neighboring kingdom of Mardin was preparing for war, and an invasion could begin at any moment. A map then reveals the positions of the kingdoms of Natra and Mardin. Originally, relations between the two kingdoms had been friendly. Everything changed when Mardin discovered large deposits of gold within its territory. The kingdom's economy expanded rapidly, but the sudden wealth corrupted many royal officials. Before long, they began invading weaker neighboring nations to acquire additional resources, and the Kingdom of Natra became one of their targets. Wine explained that Natra lacked the funds necessary to hire powerful imperial warriors. Their military consisted mostly of ordinary royal soldiers. However, according to Falanya, the morale of Natra's troops was incredibly high. Many soldiers had sworn to fight to the death beneath Prince Wine's banner, but Wine no longer wished to see his soldiers die. In reality, he was calculating the financial cost of war and desperately wanted to avoid spending the kingdom's precious treasury funds. Suddenly, Falanya took his hand and wished her older brother victory in the coming battle. Her innocent faith filled Wine with guilt. In the end, he resolved to confront the kingdom of Mardin and immediately departed for the battlefield. His real plan, however, was far simpler. He intended to launch a quick attack and then negotiate peace as soon as possible to minimize military expenses. The scene then shifts to a barren desert filled with rocky hills, where the armies of Natra and Mardin faced each other. Mounted on horseback, Vine observed the enemy force. The kingdom of Mardin had assembled 7,000 soldiers. The kingdom of Natra had only 6,000. Before the battle began, Vine rode before his army and looked upon his men. Many of them were nervous because this was their first major battle. He delivered a short speech. Despite its simplicity, his words ignited their fighting spirit and transformed their fear into determination. Meanwhile, the generals of Mardin did the same with their own soldiers, who appeared far more prepared for combat. Soon afterward, the battle began. Vine had already prepared a strategy. He ordered his troops to focus primarily on defense and rely on counterattacks. Exactly as he predicted, Mardin's forces launched their assault through the center. Yet something unexpected occurred. Natra's soldiers successfully held the line and stopped the enemy advance. On the opposite side, commanders from Mardin quickly informed their generals that their troops were losing ground against the army of Natra. At the same time, Natra's generals reported their success to Vine. The reason for this achievement was simple. Wine had previously arranged for Natra's army to train alongside imperial warriors, the strongest military force on the continent. As a result, Natra's soldiers possessed superior combat techniques compared to those of Mardin. Even Wine himself could hardly believe that one of his casual decisions was now producing such excellent results. However, the spirit of Natra's troops gradually began to weaken. Eventually, Mardin's soldiers started forcing them backward. Although Natra possessed superior techniques, their mindset still lacked the experience necessary for such a brutal battle. When the generals informed Wang they recommended a retreat, he agreed. Unfortunately, word of this decision reached the enemy. The commanding general of Mardin immediately recognized the opportunity and decided to target Prince Wang directly. In fact, the generals of Mardin personally descended onto the battlefield with the intention of killing him. But Wang had anticipated this possibility from the very beginning. Hidden nearby was an ambush force of archers led personally by Raleigh. The Mardin general was completely caught off guard. He had never expected such a force to be waiting for him. The sudden attack threw his troops into confusion. The general himself was wounded, and chaos spread among his soldiers. At the same time, Ninyam entered the battlefield personally and eliminated the remaining Mardin forces. She offered the enemy generals a chance to surrender. The commanding general refused. As a result, Ninyam executed him. His death became the decisive signal of victory. The kingdom of Natra had defeated the kingdom of Mardin. The following day, Wang and Ninyam met once again with the kingdom's generals and officials. The officials asked what their next move should be. Wang replied that the entire situation was exhausting and that the soldiers were undoubtedly exhausted after the war. At the same time, he feared being viewed as a weak ruler. So, almost carelessly, he announced that they should seize Mardin's gold mine. He fully expected the royal officials to reject the proposal. Instead, they praised it as a stroke of genius. Not only could Natra's forces easily occupy the mine, but controlling Mardin's gold supply would also provide a tremendous strategic advantage. The next day, Wang felt satisfied with the kingdom's victory. He intended to maximize every possible benefit from the war. Then disaster struck. One of the workers from the gold mine arrived with shocking news. The mine's gold reserves were nearly exhausted. Wang was stunned, but only moments later, a cunning idea entered his mind. He would simply sell the mine back to the kingdom of Mardin. According to the miner's report, Mardin still had no idea that the gold reserves were almost gone. Upon hearing this scheme, Ninyam silently sighed. Nevertheless, she continued supporting him and advised strengthening security around the mine, since Mardin would likely attempt to reclaim it. As it turned out, her prediction was absolutely correct. The kingdom of Mardin dispatched 30,000 soldiers to retake the mine. Meanwhile, only 5,000 Natra soldiers remained to defend it. Before long, Wang formulated another strategy focused entirely on defense. According to his calculations, Mardin would struggle to maintain such a massive army in the field for an extended period. Feeding, paying, and supplying 30,000 soldiers would place enormous strain on their resources. If Natra could simply hold its position for a month, Mardin would likely propose peace negotiations exactly as Wang expected. Thus began what became known as the Mine War. From the very beginning, the advantage belonged to the kingdom of Natra. In truth, General Drawwood, the commander of Mardin's forces, could hardly believe what he was witnessing on the battlefield. The reason behind Natra's success was Wang's brilliant use of terrain. The mine and surrounding rocky hills had effectively become a fortress. The only route available for Mardin's army passed through a narrow corridor and a steep slope. As a result, Mardin could not deploy large numbers of soldiers simultaneously. Instead, they were forced to attack in small groups. This turned them into easy targets for Natra's defenders, who systematically defeated each group one after another. Furthermore, Wang had anticipated the possibility of a rear assault. To counter it, he devised a trap that made the rocky cliff nearly impossible to climb. Mardin's troops failed to cross it, and Wang did not stop at defense alone. He had also prepared a counter-offensive strategy. Under the cover of darkness, he ordered his soldiers to conduct guerrilla raids and set fire to Mardin's camps. The sudden nighttime attacks plunged Mardin's army into complete chaos. The repeated humiliation enraged General Drawwood, causing his hatred for Prince Weinsalema Arbalest to grow even stronger. The story then shows Prince Weinsalema Arbalest sitting calmly inside his command tent because his strategy was unfolding exactly as planned without a single complication. The forces of the Kingdom of Natra had successfully held their ground against the Kingdom of Mardin for more than 2 full weeks. As a result, the morale of Natra's soldiers had risen tremendously due to their repeated victories on the battlefield. Meanwhile, the soldiers of Mardin were losing confidence with each passing day. Even so, Wang knew that the kingdom of Mardin would not retreat easily, especially after spending an enormous amount of money on the war. And just as he expected, that proved to be true. General Drawwood sent one of his commanders, Logan, to meet with Wine and negotiate a peace agreement. However, Logan had no intention of conducting genuine negotiations. Instead, he attempted to impose his own terms, demanding that Wine withdraw Natra's forces from the gold mine and accept responsibility for all damages caused during the war. Naturally, Wine rejected the proposal outright. He was not intimidated in the slightest and remained calm and composed throughout the entire conversation. But as Logan prepared to leave, he insulted Ninyam because of her heritage. He referred to her as a descendant of slaves and claimed that someone like Vine should not surround himself with people of her status. For a brief moment, overwhelming anger appeared on Vine's face, yet he somehow managed to control himself. Maintaining his smile, he allowed Logan to leave unharmed. The scene then shifts back to General Drawwood's command tent. After 3 weeks of war, his patience had completely run out. As a result, he began preparing his entire army for a final all-out assault on the mine, hoping that one decisive attack would break through Natra's defenses and reclaim the gold mine once and for all. Suddenly, a soldier entered the tent carrying Commander Logan. Drawwood was shocked when he saw Logan's severed head thrown onto the table before him. In the next instant, the soldier attacked Drawwood's guards and killed every one of them until only the general remained inside the tent. Still stunned, Drawwood watched as the soldier removed his helmet. The man beneath the armor was none other than Prince Wine himself. Drawwood was completely astonished. He had never imagined that Wine would exploit the gap in Marden's headquarters security and personally infiltrate the command center. After all, Marden's forces had blocked every route leading from the mine, making such an operation seem impossible. Yet Wine had discovered a shortcut along the mountainside. He had also utilized an abandoned mining tunnel that once served as an underground passage, allowing him to reach Drawwood's headquarters without being detected. Afterward, Wine killed Drawwood and informed him that his men had insulted Ninyam the previous day. He made it absolutely clear that he would destroy anyone who dared to insult her. Thus, Wine secured another victory in the war. That evening, a magnificent banquet was held inside the royal palace of the Kingdom of Natra to celebrate their successful defense of the gold mine. The kingdom's officials and generals stepped forward one after another to thank Wine for his brilliant strategies. Sometime later, Ninyam approached him and requested a private conversation. She informed him that the capital of the Kingdom of Marden had fallen to another nation and that the King of Marden had been killed. Upon hearing this news, Vine lowered his head in disappointment. For the second time, his plan to profit by selling the gold mine back to Marden had failed. However, Ninyam soon delivered some good news. She presented a report from one of the mine workers confirming the discovery of a new gold vein deep within the mine, a development that could compensate for the enormous losses caused by the war. In the dream, he sat alongside Ninyam, enjoying dinner with his former classmates. The first person to appear was Lowellmina Earthworld, commonly known as Lo, a blonde-haired girl. She had always loved causing trouble and acting impulsively, constantly dragging her friends into difficult situations. At times, she would interfere with illegal smuggling operations and immediately find herself fighting criminal organizations and gangs without hesitation. More than once, Vine advised her to stop behaving so recklessly. Each time, she refused and insisted that she would never change. Eventually, Vine awoke inside his office and told Ninyam about the dream he had seen. Together, they wondered what had become of their old friends. Later that day, they awaited the arrival of an imperial princess who was scheduled to visit the Kingdom of Natra. The empire appeared eager to establish new alliances because of its unstable internal situation, especially as the struggle for the vacant imperial throne intensified following the emperor's death. However, Ninyam noticed something unusual. The visitor was not one of the imperial princes, as many had expected. Instead, the visitor was the imperial princess herself. A short time later, the imperial princess arrived at the royal palace of Natra, accompanied by 12 imperial delegates. Vine, Falanya, and Ninyam welcomed her during a grand formal ceremony. Vine warmly greeted the princess, whose face was partially concealed beneath a black veil. Then the imperial advisor accompanying her announced the purpose of the visit. The empire wished to propose a marriage between the imperial princess and Prince Vine. The announcement left Vine, Falanya, and Ninyam completely stunned. Before Vine could respond, the princess removed the cloth covering her face. To everyone's astonishment, the imperial princess was actually Lowellmina, Low Earthworld, Vine's old friend from their academy days. The story then returns to Vine's office. He sat there overwhelmed with confusion and suspicion. He could not shake the feeling that the entire situation might be some elaborate trap. After all, he still struggled to accept that Lo was truly an imperial princess. Years earlier, she had told him that she was merely the daughter of an ordinary noble living in a small village. As a result, Vane had no idea how he should respond to the marriage proposal. Furthermore, Lo's impulsive personality and love of chaos convinced him that she was hiding another motive behind her visit. Later, Vine and Lo shared dinner together. Attempting to uncover her true intentions, Vine asked why she had come. She replied that she had become interested in him because of his accomplishments and his victory over the kingdom of Marden. Her answer only made Vine more suspicious. Part of him felt she was joking. At the same time, he realized she could not openly reveal her true motives in front of so many people. Therefore, he told her that he intended to give her a gift: winter clothing suitable for the harsh climate of the kingdom of Natra. A short while later, palace guards arrived at Lo's room carrying 2 large boxes. They claimed the boxes contained the gifts that Vane had promised her. The surprise was that the boxes contained no gifts at all. Inside were Wine and Ninyam themselves. Once they were alone, all 3 abandoned their formal appearances and began acting like old friends again. Lo expressed her immense happiness at seeing them once more, and they freely exchanged jokes and memories. Afterward, Lo instructed Brandel to guard the door and ensure that nobody could overhear their conversation. Only then did she reveal the true reason behind her journey to the kingdom of Natra. She wanted Vine's help eliminating the 3 imperial princes, her own brothers, so that she could seize the imperial throne herself. Wine was extremely hesitant. He felt that the kingdom of Natra simply lacked the strength necessary to challenge the empire. Lo admitted that he was correct. However, she explained that the empire was already fractured and unstable because of the fierce rivalry between the 3 princes. That instability created an opportunity for Natra to influence the outcome. She continued by explaining that she had grown tired of watching the empire deteriorate under her older brothers. For that reason, she had decided to participate in the succession struggle personally. Unfortunately, almost everyone within the empire considered her unqualified to become empress. As a result, she had been forced to seek support beyond imperial borders. And in her eyes, there were no better allies than Wine and Ninyam. Then she laughed and asked whether her plan sounded exciting. It became obvious that Lo's adventurous and reckless personality had not changed at all since their academy days. Wine admitted that her proposal was certainly interesting. However, he was now a prince and the ruler of an entire kingdom. He could no longer gamble with Natra's future by entering a conflict that might transform his kingdom into an enemy of the empire itself. Eventually, Wine and Ninyam said their farewells and left Lo's room. Yet it was obvious that Lo still had additional plans to persuade him. Later on, Nanaki, Falanya's personal bodyguard, came to meet Wine and Ninyam. She requested that Ninyam speak with Falanya, explaining that something about the princess's behavior seemed unusual. When Ninyam met with Falanya, she quickly discovered that the young princess was indeed troubled. Falanya confessed that she had felt lonely and anxious ever since Wine became responsible for leading the kingdom. Now, with the possibility of his marriage, those feelings had only grown stronger. Ninyam reassured her that Wine would always love her regardless of whether he married. His feelings toward his sister would never change because she remained one of the most important people in his life. Hearing those words brought Falanya some comfort. A moment later, however, she asked Ninyam what she thought about Vine's marriage. She admitted that she had always believed the most suitable person for him was Ninyam herself, and that she secretly hoped the two would someday marry. Ninyam, however, did not see herself as worthy of such a position. She still considered herself a descendant of slaves, and therefore unfit to stand beside a prince. Yet even without marriage, she was happy simply remaining by Wine's side. She described herself as the heart of his heart, the person who protected him while also finding protection through him. Unfortunately, Falanya did not fully understand what she meant. To change the subject, Ninyam pointed out that Falanya's academic performance had recently declined and suggested studying with Wine. Falanya immediately agreed and appeared delighted by the idea. That evening, Lo, Ninyam, and Brandel spent time discussing old memories. During the conversation, Brandel asked about one of the stories from the past. It turned out that Lo had once been relentlessly pursued by a prince from the kingdom of Ankadul, a man named Geralt. Even now, he continued sending her letters and gifts on a regular basis. Because of that, Lo secretly hoped that news of her engagement to Prince Wine Salema Arbalest would finally convince Prince Geralt of Ankadul to stop pursuing her once and for all. On the other hand, Vine seemed to be accompanying Falanya during her studies, and the two began reviewing the history of the kingdom of Antgadol. Vine explained that the kingdom of Antgadol had once been famous for a king who was known as the greatest flatterer on the continent. That title was born when several kingdoms united in an alliance to resist the empire, which had been expanding by taking over their lands. However, the kingdom of Antgadol became the only kingdom that submitted to the empire, and because of its betrayal of the alliance, the empire was able to invade the remaining kingdoms. In the end, the empire executed every king who had taken part in that alliance, while allowing the king of Antgadol to keep his position and granting him the title of Marquis. Vine also explained that the prince of the kingdom of Antgadol greatly resembled his father in personality. He was arrogant, cheap in character, tyrannical in behavior, and weak from a military standpoint. Suddenly, a soldier arrived and informed Vine that illegal weapons had been found inside the kingdom. Those weapons appeared to be of a new model and were not manufactured by the kingdom of Natra. At that moment, Vine began to suspect that the matter might be connected to Lo's plan. Elsewhere, Lo was fast asleep, recalling memories from her academy days. She felt that Vine might be the only person capable of understanding her problem, even though at the time, he did not know that she was the imperial princess. He only knew that she was a girl who loved doing grand things and throwing herself into dangerous adventures, yet her family always prevented her from achieving what she wanted, simply because she was a woman. Lo had grown completely tired of that reality. Vine had once advised her to confront that negative perception by changing the ideas and habits deeply rooted in society so she could change the way her family and the people looked at her. Lo smiled as she remembered that advice, and she had once asked him to help her if she ever decided to fight that battle in the future. As for Vine, he had reluctantly agreed at the time. The next morning, sunlight slipped into Lo's room while she was still asleep. Suddenly, Brandel woke her and informed her that she had received an invitation from Vine for tea. However, Lo felt that something was suspicious because she knew Vine was not the type to invite others to tea for casual conversation, so she expected that he wanted to interrogate her about something, but in the end, she accepted the invitation. During the tea gathering, Lo told her host that she intended to return to the empire because she had failed to convince him to help her seize the imperial throne, but Vine did not believe her words. It seemed as though he had understood her true intentions from the very beginning. Vine explained that the conflict between the three imperial princes would inevitably lead to rebellions in the kingdoms under imperial rule. From that perspective, he realized that Lo's visit to the kingdom of Natra was part of a plan to prevent those rebellions from happening. He reached this conclusion after discovering the smuggled weapons. According to his analysis, Lo had purchased those weapons from the west and brought them into the region in preparation for any possible rebellion. But the surprise was that the country that sold the weapons had distributed the same quantity to all three princes, making the balance of power between them equal. This meant that the war between them would continue for a long time, giving the kingdoms under imperial control a chance to rebel and declare independence. Vine also realized that Lo had previously tried to warn her brothers about the danger of these rebellions, but they ignored her because of her low status in their eyes, as the youngest and least important child of the imperial family. For that reason, she decided to enter the struggle for the throne herself in order to prove that her fears were correct. And that was not all. Vine had also discovered that one of the kingdoms most likely to rebel was the kingdom of Antgadol. Therefore, one of the reasons Lo had chosen the kingdom of Natra as a stopping point was its location near the lands of Antgadol. Lo was stunned by the accuracy of Vine's analysis. Despite having only limited evidence, he had uncovered her true motives in full detail. She did not deny the truth of his conclusions. Instead, she added that she intended to act as the bait that would ignite the coming events. If one of the rebellious kingdoms managed to capture her, that kingdom would gain a justification to eliminate the three princes and take control of the empire. Her plan focused specifically on the kingdom of Antgadol because its prince, Geralt, was obsessively infatuated with her. She was certain that if he heard about her engagement to Vine, he would rush to attack the kingdom of Natra, and then Vine would be forced to face him whether he wanted to or not. But Vine revealed that he had already sent a letter to the kingdom of Antgadol, informing them that the imperial princess was visiting the kingdom of Natra and would pass through their lands. He had done that only to prevent war from breaking out between the two kingdoms. He explained that he had left Lo free to find another way to stop the rebellion, because he had no desire to fight the kingdom of Antgadol the way she had planned. Lo replied confidently that the kingdom of Antgadol might attack Natra soon because of her. At that moment, Ninyam entered with panic on her face and told Vine that Prince Geralt had arrived at the palace and wanted to meet him. Vine went with Ninyam to receive Geralt, who had come personally to see Lo. It seemed that he had read the letter Vine had sent, but he could not wait for Lo to arrive in his country, so he decided to come to Natra himself. Geralt declared that he wanted to meet Lo immediately, but Vine asked him to rest first, until everything was prepared to receive him properly. Then he told him that he would hold a banquet bringing him together with Lo. The arrogant Geralt accepted with complete confidence. However, Vine suddenly felt distressed and dizzy, because he had never expected Geralt to come to his kingdom in person. Ninyam was also irritated by his arrogance and his lack of respect toward his host. Vine asked Ninyam to calm down, so she sat beside him and tried to regain her composure. She believed that Lo was deliberately trying to ignite conflict between Natra and Entgadol, but she was confident that Vine would not allow that to happen. In fact, he was thinking of trying to bring Lo and Geralt together, and perhaps even push them toward marriage if necessary. If Lo became Geralt's wife, she might be able to influence him, convince him to rebel against his father and stop the revolution. As for Lo, she fully understood Vine's intentions behind the banquet, but she had no intention of falling into his trap. Instead, she was completely convinced that he would eventually join her plan against the kingdom of Entgadol. Then the banquet began. Vine exaggerated his praise of Geralt in front of everyone, while the atmosphere remained extremely tense. After that, he suggested that Geralt and Lo officially announce their engagement. Geralt felt proud because of all that praise, but Lo answered that she would consider announcing the engagement if Vine agreed to accompany her to the Empire. It was clear that she was still trying to drag him into her political conflict. During the conversation, Geralt noticed the familiarity between Vine and Lo, so he asked about the nature of their relationship. Vine explained that Lo had been his classmate at the military academy. When Geralt heard that, he asked about Vine's level there. Vine humbly answered that he had spent most of his time learning swordsmanship, but Geralt had drunk too much, so he challenged Vine to a sword duel in front of everyone, wanting to show off his skills before Lo. In truth, Vine was not afraid of losing. He was worried about the exact opposite. He did not want to embarrass Geralt or reveal his true superiority over him. The duel began, and Vine planned for it to end in a draw. He did not want to look weak, but at the same time, he wanted Geralt to appear as a skilled knight so the engagement plan would proceed smoothly. At first, everything went according to his plan, but at the final moment, Geralt tripped and fell, making everyone believe that Vine had won. Vine quickly panicked and threw away his sword, trying to turn the result into a draw. But suddenly, Geralt stood up and attacked again, terrifying Vine. If that strike landed, Geralt would look like a coward who attacked after the duel had already ended, so Vine was forced to pretend he was dodging the attacks by accident in order to protect Geralt's reputation. However, Geralt continued charging forward until he smashed through the balcony door and fell from it. Everyone rushed toward the balcony in shock, and even Ninyam jumped down to check on him. But the truth was devastating to everyone. Geralt was dead. The news soon reached his father, Grenache, king of Entgadol. According to the reports, Geralt's guards and attendants had been detained inside the kingdom of Natra. Therefore, Grenache concluded that his son had been murdered and began to suspect that Vine and Lo were involved in his death. Meanwhile, Vine and Ninyam appeared in a state of utter panic after all their plans collapsed because of Geralt's death and stupidity. It seemed that war between Natra and Entgadol was now closer than ever. After that, Lo came to them and announced that she had abandoned the idea of competing for the imperial throne and was now focusing only on preventing the rebellion from breaking out. For that reason, she asked Vine to help her stop it. By then, Vine had reached such a level of frustration that he finally agreed to cooperate with her. The two agreed on a plan to deal with the kingdom of Entgadol and its allies. Vine knew that his forces were not enough to fight an open war, so he devised a plan that would allow him to confront Entgadol without being dragged into a full-scale war, while also forcing them to admit to their rebellion plot. Several days later, Vine arrived at the palace of the kingdom of Entgadol, accompanied by 4 of his guards. He had brought Prince Geralt's body with him. King Grenache seemed surprised by his arrival, and he was also angry and grief-stricken because of his suspicions about his son's death. But Vine asked to speak with him privately. There, he revealed that the Imperial Princess Lo already knew about his plan to rebel against the Empire. When Grenache heard this, he was struck with shock and fear. But Vine continued, saying that Geralt was already dead, so there was no longer any need to worry about him. Grenache did not understand what he meant, so Vine explained his entire plan. He wanted to turn Geralt into a scapegoat. Grenache would officially announce that his son had been a traitor who sought to seize the throne, and that he was the one who had started the rebellion against the Empire. Given Geralt's poor reputation within the Empire, the story Vine suggested would be easy to believe. Then Vine added that if Grenache agreed to this scenario and handed over all evidence related to the rebellion, Lo would be satisfied with stripping him of his royal income instead of issuing harsher punishments against him. He also explained that Grenache must personally ask forgiveness from Lo, who was currently in the kingdom of Natra. In the end, Grenache, mentally broken and cornered from every direction, had no choice but to accept Vine's plan. After that, we see Vine with 4 of his guards searching for a place to rest. Suddenly, silence fell around them, and Vine sensed that something unnatural was happening. Sure enough, they were struck by a sudden ambush that had been prepared in advance, forcing them to fight immediately. But the brilliant Vine quickly realized that the attack was nothing more than a trap set by the enemy. He managed to avoid a surprise strike that came from behind him. The person who attacked him was a man armed with a spear, and he looked calm as he aimed his attacks at Vine's legs. Vine told the man that he knew the attackers were spies from the West, not people acting under Grenache's orders. That surprised the man, but he continued attacking Vine without hesitation. Even so, Vine dodged his strikes with ease. Then he continued, saying that he knew the West was the one that had planned the rebellion, and invited Grenache to take part in it. He also knew that the West intended to kill Grenache and erase any evidence proving the rebellion existed. For that reason, Vine had placed his trusted men inside Grenache's palace to protect him from within. Then we see that the one who delivered the news of Geralt's death to Grenache was Nanaki, Falania's personal guard. Vine had ordered her to save Grenache from the assassination plot and protect the evidence proving the rebellion. And indeed, everything happened exactly as Vine had predicted. Western spies appeared and tried to search for evidence of the rebellion inside one of the rooms of Grenache's palace. Fortunately, Nanaki had already set a trap for them, and she eliminated them with ease. After that, we return to Vine as he continues fighting the armed man. After that man realized that the plot to steal the rebellion evidence had failed, he became furious and continued attacking Vine with the goal of killing him. But Vine was not only skilled at planning, he was also skilled in combat. Vine pulled out a weapon he had hidden in his sleeve and threw it at the man. As he threw it, he said the weapon was poisoned, which confused the man and forced him to dodge quickly. But in a flash, Vine rushed toward him and cut off his arm. When the Western spies found themselves surrounded and realized they could not win, they fled from Vine. But the matter did not end there. Vine heard the sound of horses approaching, and those horses belonged to Grenache and his guards. Vine's guards said that Grenache seemed to have broken the agreement, so Vine replied that the backup plan in that case was to run away. But Vine would not be Vine if he had not prepared a few clever tricks for his enemies. His escape was not merely a retreat, he had already prepared hundreds of soldiers from the kingdom of Natra at the border, so that Grenache would run into them when chasing him, causing him to panic and fall into confusion. After that, we see Vine, Lo, and Ninim discussing what happened. Vine had already predicted every possible outcome in advance. He said that the chance of the deal with Grenache succeeding was only 50%. If Grenache tried to capture him, he would only bring a small number of troops so he could move easily, and then Vine would be able to confront him and his guards and defeat them without needing to deploy thousands of soldiers. Then Vine added the other part of his plan, which involved Lo and the Imperial forces helping capture Grenache. As a result, Grenache was unable to move when he saw the Imperial forces in front of him, so he was arrested and taken to meet Lo, the Imperial princess. Then we see Grenache standing before Lo, Vine, and the Imperial governor. He was terrified and trying to find any way to escape the punishment awaiting him. Grenache asked Vine why he had brought the forces of the kingdom of Natra into land that belonged to the empire, accusing him of invading the region. He thought he could escape punishment after trapping Vine with that accusation, but the Imperial governor answered all of his questions and accusations against Vine. He explained that the presence of Natra's forces on Imperial land was completely natural because they were supposed to participate in a joint military exercise with the Imperial forces. This answer was completely unexpected for Grenache, to the point that he could not respond. Once again, Vine proved his brilliance by predicting every possible accusation. He had ordered Ninim to contact the Imperial official stationed in Natra and send a message requesting a joint military exercise with the Imperial forces. Surrounded from every direction, Grenache realized that Vine had planned everything precisely even before visiting his palace. In the end, he surrendered and asked Princess Lo for forgiveness. The next day, inside the kingdom of Natra, Lo was speaking with Ninim. She said she would return to the empire and had decided to cancel her engagement plan with Wine. Her reason was that if she remained unengaged, she would be able to spread her influence more freely inside the empire. But Ninim was not fully convinced, and she asked her about her true feelings toward Wine. When Lo heard that question, she became flustered, blushed, and refused to answer, but Ninim did not believe her evasion. In the end, Lo admitted that she loved Vine, though she did not explain why she was canceling the engagement despite that. After that, we see Lo meeting Wine. She was still amazed by the way he had planned the entire strategy to bring down Grenache. From her point of view, Wine could have taken an easier path, such as kidnapping Grenache and torturing him to obtain his confession. But Wine answered that the easiest way for Lo to deal with Grenache was to destroy him psychologically first. At that moment, Lo understood that everything Vine had done was for her sake. She realized that he had carried it out as part of the old promise he had made to her during their academy days. In the end, Lo left the kingdom of Natra feeling more at ease, and the reason she cancelled her engagement to Vine became clear. She deeply admired and respected the relationship between Vine and Ninim. The bond between a noble prince of the royal family and a girl descended from slaves, people who were often looked down upon, was something rare and profound to her. For that reason, she felt she should not stand between Wine and Ninim, and decided to prove herself in her own way. Time passed, and Wine and Ninim appeared on their way to the kingdom of Kavarin in response to an official invitation to participate in the Spirit Festival there. The Spirit Festival is a religious festival held at the beginning of every spring. The kingdom of Kavarin wanted to build a good relationship with the kingdom of Natra by inviting Prince Wine to its lands, but Wine looked worried as he left his kingdom toward the west because he thought some remnants of the kingdom of Marden's soldiers might try to kill him. On the other hand, he did not like seeing Ninim with her hair dyed black. She had done that because the people of the West held racist views toward those descended from slaves like her. In short, Ninim warned Wine not to cause trouble inside the kingdom of Kavarin, and he agreed with her. A little later, Vine's guards informed him that they had entered the mining region belonging to the kingdom of Natra, so Vine decided to stop and check how things were going there. Wine looked pleased when he learned that gold mining activity was going well. But since one of Natra's generals, Haggard, had retired, Wine became worried because there was no one to succeed him in protecting the mines. He had also received reports that some of Natra's nobles were planning a rebellion. At the same time, a group of people wearing robes were secretly meeting and discussing how to overthrow Wine's family from the throne of the kingdom of Natra. It was clear that they intended to take advantage of Wine's trip to the kingdom of Kavarin and General Haggard's retirement to begin the rebellion. The next day, they sent a force to assassinate Wine during his journey to Kavarin. The assassination unit succeeded in separating Wine from his guards, and as a result, only Ninim remained with him. Wine was forced to think quickly to escape this predicament. Then he asked Ninim to drive the carriage toward the base of the remaining soldiers of the kingdom of Marden. He wanted to try using those soldiers to his advantage, and his plan worked. A group of soldiers appeared in front of his carriage and attacked the assassins chasing him, forcing the assassination unit to withdraw. After that, Vine introduced himself and asked to meet Prince Helmut. Then we see Vine and Ninim being taken to the secret base belonging to the remnants of Marden, but a girl named Zeno appeared. She was Helmut's right hand. She said that Helmut could not meet Vine because he was ill, and explained that his face had been burned by the soldiers of Kavarin when they invaded the capital. That was why the remaining soldiers of Marden held deep hatred toward the kingdom of Kavarin. Vine said that he was on his way to Kavarin. When Zeno heard that, she pointed her sword at him and threatened to kill him, because she thought the kingdom of Natra intended to ally with Kavarin. But Wayne surprised her with a strange offer. He asked her to accompany him to Kavarin because he guessed that the assassination unit was there. He added that if his guess turned out to be correct, he would choose to ally with the army of Marden. He also explained to her that Kavarin would host a gathering of important figures, including a group known as the Holy Elite, and that she might have a chance there to ask them for help for Marden's army. In the end, Zeno accepted his offer. In short, Vine arrived in the kingdom of Kavarin. He ordered Ninim and Zeno to gather important information, while he and his guards went to meet the king of Kavarin, Ordalasa. But on his way to meet the king, he encountered one of Kavarin's generals, who insulted Wine and spoke to him harshly. Wine did not care much about the insult. Instead, he focused his attention on that general's subordinates. Moments later, he noticed that their arms had wounds similar to the wounds of the assassination unit that had attacked him the day before. so he warned his guards and ordered them to remain on alert at all times. Meanwhile, Zeno was gathering information with Ninyam. Suddenly, she became extremely angry and nearly killed a man who stepped out of one of the carriages, but Ninyam stopped her at the last moment. After that, Zeno explained that the man was named Holonoe, and that he had been one of the senior commanders of Mardin who betrayed the kingdom and caused the capital to fall into Kavarin's hands. Ninyam understood her feelings but advised her to plan her revenge in a smarter way. After Wine met King Ordalasa, the king seemed to welcome him warmly, but he was hiding other intentions. Then the king invited Wine to meet the group known as the Holy Elite. It was clear that the king wanted to bring him into this group because he descended from followers of the Lavisha faith, which made him suitable to join them. Then we see Wine and Ninyam speaking together. Wine said that he would join the Holy Elite in order to strengthen his relations with the Western nations. After that, Wine invited Zeno to meet one of the members of the Holy Elite, a woman named Cadmelia. After they spoke for a while, Cadmelia told them the conditions for joining the Holy Elite. She said the main condition was that the kingdom of Natra had to eliminate the remaining soldiers of Mardin. Zeno almost became tense when she heard that condition, while Wine decided to think carefully before giving his answer. At the same time, Ninyam was watching the meeting between the general of Kavarin and Holonoe, and she tried to read their words from the movement of their lips, which made surprise appear on her face. It turned out that they were planning a rebellion inside the kingdom of Natra. After that, we return to the Western spies who had previously attacked Wine in the kingdom of Antgadal, and it becomes clear that they are connected to Cadmelia. They were tense and waiting for Wine's decision. The next day, Falanya was studying with her teacher about King Ordalasa. The teacher explained to her that Ordalas was one of the members of the Holy Elite, who held the highest authority in the Lavisha religion. But the problem was that the kingdom of Kavarin chose its officials only from the royal family, without caring whether they were truly fit to rule or not. The kingdom of Kavarin was also extremely racist toward the poor and slaves, to the point that its officials had a tradition based on slaughtering slaves. It was clear that Falanya felt deeply frightened as she listened to her teacher's explanation. Night fell, and Vine was holding a meeting with Ninyam and his guards. Ninyam informed him that Kavarin's two generals, Levert and Holonoe, were planning to assassinate him, and that they might attack him at the place where he was currently staying. Wine said that he understood Levert's objective. Wine also explained that Ordalasa's goal was to seize control of Natra's mines, because he had begun losing the trust of the Holy Elite. But that plan failed because the kingdom of Natra had managed to capture Mardin's gold mine, and this angered Ordalas, making all of his attention focus on Vine. After that, Zeno was present in the room, and she asked Wine to take her to meet Ordalasa the next day. It was clear that she was beginning to lose hope, because all the people of Kavarin hated Mardin and wanted to destroy it. Wine suspected that she intended to kill Ordalasa, but she explained to him that she only wanted to gain his trust and cooperate with the kingdom of Natra. Fortunately, he agreed to her request on the condition that she promise him she would not kill Ordalasa. He added that raising a sword during a discussion was a savage act. The next day, the meeting between Vine and Ordalasa took place. This time, Ordalasa was accompanied by Holonoe, who had betrayed Mardin. Ordalasa seemed very pleased because Vine had left a good impression on the Holy Elite, so it looked like he intended to marry Vine to his daughter. But Ordalas added that he did not acknowledge his daughter because she was not intelligent enough, nor skilled enough to be worthy of his bloodline. To him, his children had to be intelligent. Vine smiled at that, even though his heart was disgusted by the way Ordalasa spoke about his daughter. Then Ordalasa made a request that made Wine's blood boil. He asked Wine to send slaves like Ninyam so they could be mocked and then slaughtered as part of the massacre tradition in his kingdom. Wine remained silent as he listened to his vile words about those traditions. After Ordalasa stopped speaking, Vine's anger exploded. He struck him across the face, then killed the guard who entered the room. Moments later, Vine's guards took control of the situation, and no one else was able to enter the room. Vine seemed almost surprised at himself, as he said that a person who raises a sword during a discussion deserves that. He did what he did because Ordalasa had dared to insult slaves and kill people like Ninyam. Vine stabbed Ordalasa in the chest and killed him instantly. After that, he gave Zeno the chance to kill Holonoe, who looked terrified. Holonoe begged Wine for mercy, but Zeno killed him without mercy. After that, Wine set fire to the building where the meeting had taken place, then escaped from the kingdom of Kavarin. A short time later, Vine, Ninyam, Zeno, and Wine's guards mounted their horses. Ninim was upset by Wine's reckless decision. The person he had killed was a member of the Holy Elite and the king of the Kingdom of Kavarin, which meant that the Kingdom of Natra would have to fight Kavarin and its allies. But Vine did not mention the real reason that pushed him to kill Ordalasa, which was protecting Ninim's dignity. After that, Vine explained his plan for dealing with the Kingdom of Kavarin and its allies. He wanted to invite the remaining soldiers of Marden to join the alliance, because he would certainly need any reinforcements he could get. But then Wine began complaining that everything had become complicated and annoying, which only made Ninim even angrier. Ninim pressured him to say the real reason he killed Ordalasa, but one of his guards interrupted them and informed him that the evidence proving Holonowe's betrayal had been sent to the place Wine had ordered. At the same time, chaos broke out in the Kingdom of Kavarin, and people began burning the homes of officials. Rumors spread, saying that General Levert had killed King Ordalasa in an attempt to seize power. Levert himself was confused and did not understand what was happening. It turned out that the evidence proving the betrayal of Holonowe and Levert had been sent by Wine's guards to one of the members of the Holy Elite, named Cadmelia. Cadmelia had no choice but to support Wine's actions, so she ordered her men to burn the homes of officials in the Kingdom of Kavarin. She also informed him that rebel forces from Natra were waiting for him at the border and intended to kill him. Wine said that there was another route through the mountain, but his guard warned him that the path had been blocked by landslides. Wine was forced to think quickly to escape this situation. When an idea came to him, he ordered his guards to move. At that time, Levert and his soldiers were on their way to chase Vine. His scouting unit informed him that they had found abandoned items on the main road, and that Vine's group would likely pass through there. Levert was initially surprised that Vine had not taken the mountain route, but a short while later he discovered that the mountain path had deteriorated, so he ordered his soldiers to head toward the main road. In truth, Levert's soldiers tried to warn him that it might be a trap, and that Vine may have taken another route to prevent them from catching up to him. But Levert was neither smart nor alert enough, so he ignored the warning. A little later they found hundreds of soldiers standing before them carrying no banners. When they saw them, Levert and his soldiers were confused because the soldiers in front of them had no clear identity. They assumed they were Natra's rebel forces, intending to kill Vine, but suddenly, knights appeared from behind and attacked the soldiers, throwing them into panic and forcing them to flee toward the Natra rebel forces in front of them. The result was that Natra's rebel forces fought Levert's forces instead of attacking Vine's group, and they were forced to cross after being attacked from behind. It turned out that all of this was part of Vine's strategy. All along he had been hiding among the ruins of the mountain road, and he had Zeno summon the remaining army of Marden to attack Levert's army from behind. But his strategy did not stop there. Suddenly, a general from the forces of the Kingdom of Natra appeared in the distance, and his name was Haggard. The news of Haggard's retirement had been nothing more than a fabricated rumor that Vine had deliberately spread to draw out the rebellious nobles in Natra. As a result, he and the soldiers of the Kingdom of Natra managed to defeat both the rebel forces and Levert's forces at once. After that, Vine returned to his kingdom. He and Ninim had a special guest, the Prince of Marden. But when the prince removed his helmet, it turned out to be Zeno. In truth, she was the first daughter of the former king of Marden, and her real name was Zenobia Marden. She was the only survivor of the Kingdom of Kavarin's invasion of the capital. She said she had managed to reclaim the capital because of the deaths of Ordalasa and General Levert. Her reason for visiting the Kingdom of Natra was to declare her loyalty to Vine and request the protection of the kingdom. When Vine heard that, he became confused and frightened. It was clear that he was tired of all these responsibilities, since even managing the Kingdom of Natra alone was difficult for him. But Zeno tried to convince him with her words, saying that she was merely a woman and was not worthy of leading a kingdom. Days passed, and then we see the imperial capital. The matter of seizing the emperor's throne had still not been settled. Lo, who was one of the 4 candidates to succeed the emperor, was speaking with the mayor of the imperial capital about organizing a conference for the heirs. At that conference, 3 guests of honor would be invited, and one of them would come from the Kingdom of Natra. After the meeting, Lo felt tired and lay down on the sofa, but Brandel said that when the delegation from the Kingdom of Natra arrived in the capital, Lo would be excited to welcome Wine and his group again. Lo was slightly surprised because at first she had thought that the representative of the Kingdom of Natra would be Wine, but it turned out that his sister Falanya would be the one coming. On the other hand, Wine was upset because he was worried about Falanya's condition, even though Ninim and Nanaki would be with her. After that, we moved to Wine holding a meeting with the officials of Natra. At first, Vine was the one invited to attend the Empire's invitation. But since the Kingdom of Natra was still recovering from the recent war, it was dangerous for him to leave the kingdom. Even so, some officials encouraged him to go, considering the invitation a great opportunity to expand the kingdom's alliances. At that moment, Falanya volunteered to represent Vine and attend the Empire's invitation. Everyone was surprised by her words, but in the end, no one dared to reject the decision of the princess of the kingdom of Natra, converted as requested, without shortening. The next day, Falanya and Ninyam were on their way to the banquet. Ninyam quickly explained Lowelmina's position in the struggle for the throne. After Lowelmina had managed to stop the previous rebellion against the empire, she gained enough support to qualify as a potential empress, but she did not want the throne because she had no military backing. That was why she founded her own faction, known as the Patriots faction, which included influential people who cared about the empire's future. Lowelmina placed herself within that faction as a woman who worked hard without waiting for an official position. A short while later, Falanya and Ninyam arrived at the banquet. The nobles and officials there were amazed by Falanya's beauty and elegance. Lowelmina welcomed her warmly and invited her to meet her 3 older brothers. On the other hand, Ninyam was worried about their closeness to her because the kingdom of Natra had to remain neutral and avoid appearing to support any candidate for the throne. Falanya walked with Lowelmina before her 3 brothers, Demetrio, Bardlosh, and Manfred. Wine had already told her beforehand about the nature of those 3. Manfred was the prince skilled at decorating his words, which was why he gained the support of provinces influenced by his promises. Bardlosh was the prince backed by the military, and his military strength was considerable. As for Demetrio, he was the eldest son and relatively the foolishest among the 4 siblings. The only reason he had support was because he was the oldest. Demetrio looked down on Falanya, unable to believe that the kingdom of Natra had sent a child like her to the imperial banquet. Lowelmina intervened and explained that the kingdom was still recovering and that Vine was busy managing his kingdom, but Bardloch and Manfred were trying to compete to get closer to Falanya, hoping to gain the support of the kingdom of Natra. The attentive Ninyam whispered to Falanya that she should leave that place, and Lowelmina used an excuse so they could step away. A little later, Ninyam praised Falanya for her effort, but Falanya was worried that she might have made a mistake and disappointed Wine. After that, Ninyam left the area and asked Nanaki to take care of Falanya. Then it turned out that Ninyam had gone to meet Lowelmina, and she asked her what her true goal was behind that meeting. Lowelmina once again said that she wanted the support of the kingdom of Natra in the struggle for the throne, but Ninyam insisted that the kingdom of Natra would remain neutral according to Vine's instructions. A verbal clash broke out between them. Then we moved to the 4 candidates for the throne, who had gathered in the same hall to begin the imperial conference. The next day, Falanya was walking with the mayor of the imperial capital, and she arrived at the building of the People's Assembly. It was clear that representatives of the people from various regions of the empire gathered there and debated, sometimes even arguing over the policies of the empire. Falanya was interested in what was happening and wanted to learn more about the matters there. On the other hand, Demetrio was extremely angry because his siblings did not value him as the eldest son, and he was also annoyed by the attitude of the kingdom of Natra, which had sent a child to represent it. Suddenly, a malicious idea came to him as a way to respond to Wine's attitude. Demetrio went to meet Falanya, who was with Lowelmina, and without any introduction, he said that he wanted to marry her. His words shocked everyone, and Falanya herself began to tremble. He also said that this marriage would strengthen the relationship between the empire and the kingdom of Natra. It was clear from Falanya and Ninyam's reactions that they could not believe his words, and that they knew there was a hidden interest behind them. Falanya said that she would think about it first, but Demetrio pressured her to answer immediately. Lowelmina tried to warn him, but he ordered her to be silent and said that the marriage would benefit both kingdoms, so there was no need to worry. From this, Demetrio's evil intentions toward Falanya became clear if she agreed to become his wife. But Falanya, who had learned many things in the People's Assembly, replied in a loud voice and said that she was grateful for his offer. But a royal marriage was a political matter, and she did not have the right to decide it alone. Demetrio became extremely annoyed by her refusal and threatened that if he became emperor, he would destroy the kingdom of Natra. But suddenly, Wine appeared and interrupted Demetrio. At first, Wine did not understand what was happening there, and he only wanted to interrupt the situation. Then Ninyam handed him a small note explaining what was going on. After that, Wine began thinking about Demetrio's true intentions, trying to understand the situation while searching for a solution. But Demetrio asked Wine to decide the matter of his marriage to Falanya. It was clear that Vine understood the game, so he answered that he agreed to the marriage. Then he continued and explained that the marriage would strengthen the relationship between the Empire and the Kingdom of Natra. His answer greatly surprised Falanya. Then it turned out that he had reopened the topic of his own engagement to Lowell Mina, which stunned Demetrio. Demetrio wanted to torment Wine and the Kingdom of Natra, but he did not want Wine to benefit from his marriage to Lowell Mina, especially since she was a candidate for the throne. His anger increased when Lowell Mina understood the situation and helped Wine discuss their engagement. Even the foolish Demetrio did not realize that Vine was using him. Demetrio said that he did not approve of Lowell Mina's engagement, but she rejected his words and said that he had no right to decide that. Then Ninyam said that nobles of Natra were not allowed to marry into the same family. In the end, Wine ended the matter by using the excuse that it was already late, and Demetrio agreed. It was clear that Demetrio had abandoned his intention to marry Falanya, so that the Kingdom of Natra would not gain anything from that marriage. After Demetrio and Lowell Mina left the hall, Falanya hugged Wine and thanked him for saving her from that situation. Since it was already late, Falanya went to sleep. Wine then spoke with Ninyam, telling her that the situation of the Kingdom of Natra was safe, but that he was still worried about the movements of the Holy Elite. He also said that he had heard they were planning something in a certain country. But after that, exhaustion appeared on him, and he nearly collapsed from fatigue and lack of sleep. Ninyam was worried about him, but he insisted that he was fine. Then she handed him a letter from Lowell Mina, which contained an invitation to meet her secretly that night. Then we moved to Wine going to meet Lowell Mina at the agreed place. She asked to meet him to seek his advice about her plans to seize control of the imperial throne, because the imperial conference that had been held earlier had failed and achieved nothing useful. But Wine did not see any clear solution to the situation. He added that Lowell Mina was moving in the right direction because the people had begun to like her. In the end, Lowell Mina decided to leave, but she confirmed that she would still involve Wine and Ninyam in her struggle. The next day, Prince Manfred received a report from his men that Wine had arrived. His men told him that Wine planned to meet Demetrio the following day. Manfred began praising Wine's abilities, but suddenly, he ordered Wine to be killed afterward. It was clear that Manfred feared Wine's abilities and saw him as a major threat if he became the new emperor. The next day, a meeting was held between Wine and Demetrio. Wine appeared on his way to Demetrio's residence with Ninyam, and his severe exhaustion was obvious. Wine asked about Falanya, and Ninyam told him that she was studying at the People's Assembly. The people there had accepted her presence, and she was allowed to express her opinion. Wine arrived and met Demetrio. Inside, he was thinking about why Demetrio wanted to speak with him. Was it about marriage or about diplomatic relations with the Kingdom of Natra? Before the conversation began, a maid served him a cup of tea, but Vine suspected it and asked the maid to drink the tea she had brought. The maid looked nervous and said she would not drink it, but he insisted. Suddenly, Demetrio interrupted him and called him foolish and disrespectful for refusing to drink what his host had offered. He began doubting everything. After that, Demetrio grabbed the cup of tea and was about to drink it. Vine tried to stop him, but it was too late because Demetrio had already drunk the tea. And indeed, a short while later, Demetrio vomited blood and lost consciousness, while the maid who had served the tea fled. Ninyam tried to run after her, but Wine stopped her and told her to look for a doctor to treat Demetrio. He said that the most important thing now was Demetrio's safety. After the incident, Wine was detained and interrogated for several days, because he had become a suspect in the poisoning of Demetrio. After his interrogation ended, he spoke with Ninyam and told her that Demetrio had survived and returned to his kingdom, but his brothers, Manfred and Bardlach, believed that the culprit was from Miltars, the city where the imperial conference had been held. For that reason, Manfred and Bardlach surrounded the city of Miltars with imperial forces. Even Falanya helped Lowell Mina and the mayor of Miltars calm the situation inside the city. At that time, Wine intended to return to the Kingdom of Natra to distance himself from the city's conflict. But suddenly, he received a report from his guard about the appearance of forces carrying the banner of Lavisha, led by Cadmelia, heading toward the city. It seemed that she had come to liberate the city of Miltars from the pressure of the Empire, which was on the verge of attacking it. Wine became furious with Cadmelia, because it had become difficult for him to leave the city. Ninyam said that if war broke out in Miltars, the city guards would not be able to handle the situation on their own. Suddenly, Wine lost consciousness. It was clear that he had collapsed physically and mentally because of the pressure of the situation. He lay unconscious, with Falanya and Ninyam beside him. Falanya was worried about his condition and decided to go to the People's Assembly to cast her vote. She did that only to help her brother calm the situation inside the city of Miltars. A little later, Falanya arrived at the People's Assembly. The situation was somewhat chaotic. Some wanted to join the army of Lavisha, while others wanted to side with the Empire. She walked to the center of the hall and began delivering a speech expressing her opinion. She advised the People's Assembly to unite in making a decision for the good of the city. She was confident that most of the people of Miltars, most of whom were merchants, would have the right judgment. Every eye was fixed on her. As for those who had been causing unrest because of their differing opinions, they were immediately stunned by her words, converted as requested, without shortening. At the same time, Vine had woken up and embraced Ninyum. Ninyum cried and told him not to push himself too hard. A little later, Falanya returned and met Vine after he had awakened, and he praised her courage and her wonderful conduct in the People's Assembly even before he had fully regained consciousness. But she was humble and offered to do anything else that could help him. Vine was surprised by how quickly she had grown, to the point that her noble aura had become clear. After that, he ordered her to continue giving speeches that encouraged the citizens of Miltars, and she also led 30,000 of the city's residents to ask the forces of Lavisha for help. Cadmelia was shocked because she did not have enough resources to take in 30,000 residents from the city of Miltars, but suddenly, Vine appeared and offered to help her. After that, we see Cadmelia and King Gruyere of the Kingdom of Solgest leading the army of Lavisha. It was clear that the 30,000 residents of Miltars had managed to leave the city safely. Wine, whom the mayor of Miltars had appointed as the city's representative, expressed his gratitude for the help they had provided. Then he asked them about their plans for the future. Cadmelia replied that she would deploy her forces to drive away the imperial princes and liberate the city. But Wine said that he did not want to exhaust the army of Lavisha any further. He wanted the city to be reclaimed by its own people. He also said that he would buy weapons and armor from Lavisha at 3 times the normal price. After that, if they succeeded in retaking the city, the mayor of Miltars would build a temple in honor of the religion of Lavisha. Cadmelia was surprised by Vine's plan, but she intended to refuse his offer in order to see how far his abilities could go. On the other hand, Gruyere accepted his offer because he was known as a king extremely attached to money. When Cadmelia heard that, she could not oppose Gruyere's decision. The next day, the residents of Miltars wore the war armor supplied by Lavisha and moved to confront the armies of the imperial princes who were surrounding their city. This terrified Bardlock because he did not want to kill civilians whom he considered extremely important, especially since the empire still needed Miltars as the largest commercial city on the continent. On the other hand, Wine and Lowell Mina were standing on top of a hill, watching Miltars. Vine was pleased by the doubt showing on Bardlock's face. He told Lowell Mina to ask her older brothers to negotiate. In the end, negotiations took place between the 2 imperial princes and the mayor of Miltars. Vine was present as the city's representative. In that meeting, Vine's genius appeared once again. He told Bardlock and Manfred that he knew who had been behind the plan to kill Demetrio. Wine explained that the only person capable of doing such a thing was Demetrio himself. He was someone who could outmaneuver the prince's personal guards and penetrate the city's tight security. He said that Demetrio had wanted to push Miltars into a confrontation with the imperial army led by Bardlock and Manfred. And once both armies were exhausted, Demetrio would send his own forces and attack Bardlock and Manfred. In that way, the imperial throne would fall into his hands. Bardlock and Manfred understood that Vine wanted to place all the blame on Demetrio, and they no longer had any reason to attack Miltars, nor could either of them deny his words. The mayor of Miltars confirmed that he would not take offense at the actions of Bardlock and Manfred when they surrounded the city. On the contrary, the people of Miltars were prepared to compensate for any harm that had befallen Demetrio inside their city. As for Manfred, the true culprit, he understood that he could not reject Vine's words. Also, the implicit accusation against Demetrio removed him from the list of candidates for the imperial throne. Finally, the conflict ended, and the residents returned to their city. But it was clear that the people had turned against the princes, and their inclination toward supporting Lowell Mina's rise to the position of empress became stronger, even though she admitted that the hearts of the citizens already belonged to someone else, and that person was Falanya. The mayor said that Wine had wanted to help Miltars for Falanya's sake. She loved the city and its people's assembly system. In the palace of the Kingdom of Natra, Wine was very happy because their economy was developing rapidly, especially in the export sector, thanks to his cooperation with Mealtars. Ninyam explained to him that the kingdom of Marden was in good condition, but she feared that they might try to gain independence from Natra if their economy accelerated too quickly. She advised Wine to look for a larger trade partner so that he would not fall behind the kingdom of Marden. A short while later, Wine's guard appeared and told him that he had received an invitation from Gruyere to visit the kingdom of Soljest. Wine accepted the invitation and planned to visit Marden first. At that time, Zenobia was informed by her advisor that Wine was coming to visit them. She tried to predict the reason for his arrival, perhaps to discuss the future of the kingdom of Marden, which had now become subordinate to the kingdom of Natra. Her advisor also suggested that she ask the kingdom of Natra for a reward for Marden's economic progress, and that they could offer it through her marriage to Wine, so that the relationship between Marden and Natra would become stronger and more closely tied. Not long after that, Vine and Ninyam began their journey to the kingdom of Marden. On the way, Ninyam asked Wine about his opinion on marriage plans. Vine replied that he still wanted to remain single, and explained that the purpose of his visit to Marden was to ask whether the partnership between Marden and Natra would continue or not. Vine arrived and was warmly received by Zenobia, and he felt a little embarrassed when he saw her wearing an attractive outfit. She continued hosting him at dinner and told him that they had received protests from the kingdom of Delunio regarding their exported products. According to Zenobia, the kingdom of Delunio was conservative and did not like foreign products entering its territory. Vine told her not to worry because Delunio's protest was only talk and their representative had still not arrived. Also, Vine was actually waiting for a marriage proposal from Zenobia, but throughout the dinner, she did not discuss marriage at all, which annoyed him and made him mutter in front of Ninyam. Still, he was confident that Zenobia would ask him to marry her when they went on a tour of the city the next day. The next day, Vine and Ninyam met Zenobia, and she was wearing the same military uniform she had worn the first time she met Wine. It was clear that she was playing the role of Zeno, the military commander, not the role of Queen Zenobia. A little later, Zenobia took Wine and Ninyam on a tour around the city, and by noon they arrived at a bronze statue that had recently been completed. She explained to them that this statue was a symbol of hope for peace and prosperity for the people of the kingdom of Marden. Wine tried to provoke her and said that the kingdom of Marden would remain stable, and that its prosperity might allow it to free itself from Natra, but it was clear that she was not affected. She said that the kingdom of Marden would continue to advance even while still being part of Natra. Those words made Wine confident that the kingdom of Marden would not betray his kingdom. Wine, Ninyam, and Zenobia rested for a while in the city garden. There, Zenobia asked why Wine kept a slight distance from the people. His direct answer revealed his strength as a royal leader and made her feel that she was not qualified to become his wife. Then we moved to Zenobia receiving a report from her guard about the arrival of Sergis, the prime minister of the kingdom of Delunio. In her kingdom, she welcomed him. The purpose of his visit was to protest the export policy of the kingdoms of Natra and Marden. After that, he insisted that he wanted to speak with Wine. Zenobia was annoyed because she felt he was looking down on her, but Wine suddenly appeared and asked him about his demands. Wine and Sergis began their discussion. Sergis objected to Natra's products because in his opinion, they did not align with the teachings of the religion of Lavisha, but Wine pretended not to know anything and responded to his complaint normally. Sergis felt that his protest was not being taken seriously, so he became annoyed and decided to leave. But before leaving, he said that he would not forget how Wine and Zenobia had treated him. The next day, Wine and Ninyam were about to travel to the kingdom of Soljest. Zenobia bid them farewell and sent with them a message warning them about Sergis because he certainly would not give up after what had happened the previous day. A little later, Vine and Ninyam finally arrived in Pithka, the capital of the kingdom of Soljest, a port city with beautiful sea views. They received a warm welcome from Gruyere, who invited Vine to his palace for dinner. Shortly after, Gruyere's servants lifted his palanquin, which surprised Vine. Gruyere explained that nobles show their power when they do things that ordinary people cannot do. In the end, Vine walked beside Gruyere. Vine was slightly surprised as he looked at Gruyere's palanquin, but despite that, he was pleased to see the condition of the kingdom of Soljest. He thought that the reason Gruyere had invited them was to discuss cooperation between Natra and Soljest. He was confident that if Natra cooperated with Soljest, the kingdom of Delunio Delunio would not be able to do anything against them. When they arrived at the hall, Vine was surprised to see a girl whose hair color resembled Gruyère's. It turned out that she was his daughter, Torchila, and she wanted to meet him, even offering to explain all the dishes that would be served. Although Vine felt she was cute, he tried to focus on his goal, which was convincing Gruyère to cooperate. But the food was so delicious that he was drawn to it and could not resist. After that, we see Vine sleeping in his room, annoyed with himself, because he had not managed to finalize the cooperation deal with Gruyère. The next day, Vine tried to meet Gruyère to speak with him about the cooperation agreement, but Gruyère seemed to avoid meeting him the entire day. At night, Vine spoke with Ninim and felt that Gruyère's behavior was strange. He thought that Gruyère might want to assassinate him, because there was no other reason for him to request a meeting besides cooperation. Vine told Ninim that they had to prepare to return quickly, but instead, Gruyère invited Vine to speak with him about an important matter. When he arrived, they were cautious, afraid that it might be a trap to assassinate him. But Gruyère invited Ninim to sit, and he knew she was a servant, yet he showed no concern about that, which surprised both Vine and Ninim. After that, Gruyère explained to them that the teachings of Lavisha were limited to books, and that he did not care about them very much. Those words made Vine and Ninim feel somewhat relieved, and they realized that Gruyère was a different kind of king, one with a more open mind. After that, Vine expressed his intention to build a cooperative relationship with the kingdom of Solyest, and Gruyère agreed, allowing Vine to return to Natra. Gruyère also said that the details of the cooperation would be sent later. Vine and Ninim were surprised by Gruyère's kindness, but they decided to bid him farewell and return to the kingdom of Natra. However, after they left, it turned out that Sergus had been watching them from afar. It was then revealed that Gruyère and Sergus had been working together from the very beginning. Gruyère believed that Wayne would become an obstacle to his kingdom, and he intended to trap him and bring down the kingdom of Natra. Not long after, Wayne returned to the palace. Ninim told him that the kingdom of Marden was now fighting the kingdom of Delunio on the border, and that the cooperation letter between Solyest and Natra had still not arrived. At that moment, Vine realized that Gruyère had deceived him, because his trip to Solyest had allowed Delunio to seize the opportunity and attack Marden. Vine was deeply annoyed when he understood this, especially since the kingdom of Delunio had the support of Solyest, and if the battle became more complicated, Solyest would certainly intervene. After that, Zenobia came to meet Vine and apologized for her mistake. She said that she had been forced to send an envoy to the kingdom of Delunio, offering peace in order to stop the war. At first, Zenobia thought Vine would be angry with her, but in truth, he supported her decision and told her that he would find a solution soon. Not long after, Vine and Zenobia were on their way to the kingdom of Delunio. Vine expected that Delunio had deliberately chosen to fight Marden in order to push Solyest into a conflict with Natra so that Delunio could reclaim its lands easily with Solyest's support. After hearing this, Zenobia doubted that their discussion with Sergus would go well, but Vine reassured her and said that he had a plan that would convince Sergus. At the same time, Gruyère and the army of the kingdom of Solyest were on their way to attack the kingdom of Natra, and he was excited to face Vine and kill him. But when Gruyère and his army reached Natra's forces, they did not find Vine there. He thought that Vine was probably trying to convince Delunio to make peace, and he was confident that Sergus would not be persuaded easily. Surprisingly, Gruyère, who had initially seemed fat and lazy, showed great skill with the spear and was able to overpower Natra's forces almost by himself, as if he had been waiting for Vine's plan. At the same time, Vine and Zenobia arrived in the kingdom of Delunio. Vine was received in Delunio, and Sergus was present as well. They continued the discussion with Zenobia, who began speaking about a peace treaty and said that she was willing to return the disputed lands between Delunio and Marden at double the amount. But it turned out that Sergus rejected this offer because his true goal was to make Solyest and Natra enter a war so that he could become a member of the Holy Elite. To Sergus, the kingdom of Marden was merely a small excuse to move forward with his plan. Also, Sergus was a fanatical follower of the teachings of Lavisha, and he even intended to hand over the lands of Delunio to Lavisha. Vine intervened when he saw that Zenovia's plan had failed. He threatened Sergus with the clothing products that the people of Delunio bought from Natra, saying that the dye contained extremely poisonous substances. A little later, he explained that the poison in the clothes would gradually spread, then kill the people one after another, which would lead to rumors of a plague spreading through Delunio. He explained that chaos would engulf the country and that the people would try to flee Delunio. And when that happened, Vine intended to move 800,000 citizens of Natra into Delunio, because he admitted that Natra could not fight Solyest, so he preferred to run away. Sergus did not believe Vine's words and still doubted him. Suddenly, a servant came and informed Sergus of the results of the war, saying that Natra's forces had withdrawn from the front line, while Solyest's forces continued to pursue them. Sergus was terrified and believed that Vine would truly move the population into Delunio. At the same time, the people of Delunio began to suffer poisoning from the clothing imported from Natra. Vine was delighted when he saw the panic on Sergus's face, then continued speaking and said that he had the antidote. In truth, Vine had deliberately ordered Natra's forces to withdraw in order to make the poison lie seem more convincing to Sergus. In the end, Sergus surrendered and agreed to cooperate with Vine to defeat Gruyere. Vine asked him to order Delunio's forces to attack Solyest's forces from behind. It became clear that Solyest's forces were far stronger than Natra's, and they continued striking Natra's forces, which had withdrawn to the fortress. When Haggard, the general of the kingdom of Natra, saw the situation, he predicted that if things continued this way, Natra's forces would certainly lose. But Ninyim, who saw Vine from afar, said that the battle was not over yet. Delunio's forces moved and prepared to attack Solyest from behind, while Natra's defending forces decided to attack and repel the frontal assault coming from Solyest. Gruyere laughed with satisfaction when he realized Vine's clever plan. He had not imagined that Vine would be able to convince Sergus. After that, the general of Solyest's army suggested that Gruyere withdraw from the battle, but his suggestion was rejected because Gruyere wanted to kill Vine, and he decided to attack Delunio's forces. When he tried to break through the ranks of Delunio's forces, Vine suddenly appeared from the top of the cliff and drew his attention. Gruyere still possessed great strength, so he struck General Haggard and the commanders who tried to seize him, but he did not stop there. Ninyim appeared from behind Haggard, leapt at Gruyere, and wounded him. In the end, Gruyere fell to the ground before Ninyim, and Solyest's army withdrew. And so, it was confirmed that the victor in the war was the kingdom of Natra. Not long after, Vine met Gruyere. After Ninyim defeated him, Gruyere had been captured by the kingdom of Natra. Vine was surprised when he saw that Gruyere's body had become extremely thin, and it turned out that Gruyere could lose weight if he was injured or exhausted severely. After that, Gruyere asked Vine when his execution would take place, but Vine refused. He had no intention of executing Gruyere. He continued by saying that Gruyere could return home if he agreed to sign a cooperation agreement between Solyest and Natra. Gruyere refused at first, and he was prepared to die just to see Vine's frustrated face as he dealt with the forces of Lavitia. But suddenly, Gruyere said that he was willing to sign the agreement if Vine expressed his enthusiasm and passion, because he was curious to know Vine's true passion and original behavior. Vine agreed and said words that left Gruyere surprised and excited. Then Gruyere laughed and agreed to sign the agreement. After that, we see Vine sleeping from exhaustion after his royal duties, while Ninyim simply smiled at him. When he woke up, Ninyim informed him of the losses the kingdom of Natra had suffered in that day's war. She also said that the people of Natra were now viewed negatively because they had fought a member of the holy elite belonging to Lavitia, which reduced the number of pilgrims passing through Marden. Not only that, but all the surplus and profits of the kingdom of Natra had shrunk in order to cover the losses of the war. Vine became very upset after hearing that, and once again began thinking about selling his kingdom. And here the story ends, dear viewers. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want a second season, tell me in the comments. And before you close the video, do not forget to press the like button to support us, subscribe to follow more episodes, and activate the notification bell so all the new anime on the channel reaches you. Write your opinions in the comments and we will meet you in new episodes. Goodbye.